Hello everyone! In the first part of this new video, we will see a new feature in Crankk, IoT sensors. In particular, I will show you how to connect the SenseCAP T1000 Tracker to Crankk. The second part of the video will instead be my point of view on how the project is going. Is Crankk growing well? In addition to a reflection on Kadena, I want to offer my personal ideas, or at least something that I would like to happen, and to do so, I will also talk about another LoRaWAN project, ThingsIX. So let's begin. The first step to do is to activate the sensor section in your Crankk dashboard. To do this, just open a ticket on the Crankk Discord, and by giving the email of your account, it will be activated. Once this is done, before going forward, you now need to obtain the device EUI and app key of the sensor you want to connect. And for the SenseCAP Tracker T1000, you need to use the SenseCAP Mate app. For those don't know, this app is necessary for the onboarding of the tracker. In the video description, you can find the tutorial of the SeedStudio. However, once you have registered, follow these steps to obtain the data you need. Once you have obtained the device EUI and app key of your sensor, you are done. Follow these simple steps to connect it to Crankk. Immediately after a few seconds, you will see that it has connected to the Crankk network. Make sure it's in the coverage, for example, of one of your gateways. In fact, you will see its data, such as GPS or temperature. If you also have IoT sensors and want to use them with your gateways, remember that to join the Crankk network, you need the license. It's lifetime and costs $150 in KDA token, and the stake of pomp node equal to $100 in CRKK token. For a $5 discount on the license purchase, you can use the coupon I_IL_Kappafox. You will get $5 back in KDA in your wallet once you have onboarded the gateway. Now, let's move on to the second part of the video, which is my more critical point of view on the project. Is Crankk growing well? I have been in Crankk since the beginning of the project, and the first thing I have to say is that the team is fantastic. There is a lot of work behind the conversion of the gateways and the continuous updating of the Crankk software. It's possible to give a new life to the M2 Pro of the MXC scam by converting it to Crankk, and above all to many helium hotspots that unfortunately the big makers no longer offer technical assistance. I'm referring, for example, to Bobcat, Nebra, Linksdot, and unfortunately others. And in fact, by introducing dual mining Crankk and helium, the Crankk team for the community has focused so much on solving the problems of helium that now, by converting a helium gateway to Crankk, you have excellent performances. And recently, multi-mining has also been introduced. To do this, make sure you have a good capacious micros D in your full gateway, and also check the status of the Raspberry every now and then to avoid problems if you install a lot of apps. In any case, with a couple of clicks in the localde board, it's possible to install many free DPIN or even others where you have to pay. This is a great novelty that is helping Crankk to grow in other DPIN communities, but at the same time, it isn't helping it. Because many are downloading the Crankk software in their gateways to do multi-mining, in this beta version, it's free for everyone, but very few people are buying the license and then stake the pomp node to join in Crankk, and this situation isn't helping the project. Most likely it is because they see the value of the token very low, or even because the team is focusing so much on multi-mining that they don't see anything interesting in Crankk IoT. Precisely for this reason, I want to talk to you about ThingsIX. What is ThingsIX? ThingsIX is an IoT LoRaWAN DPIN on Polygon, and it had an interesting idea. In short, the project was not only made up of gateways, but also of Mapper. The Mapper is a GPS device that had the key role of confirming and validating the coverage of the gateways, very useful also to solve, for example, the spoofing problem that was seen with helium. And so in practice, to obtain the ThingsIX tokens, the Mapper and the gateway had to collaborate. The more the Mapper covered more space by connecting to the gateway coverage, the greater the rewards, which both the Mapper and the gateway obtained. To participate in the project, it was not necessary to have both the gateway and the Mapper. One of them was enough, but to obtain the rewards, both of them were needed in the area. This system was really good. In addition to spoofing and etc., it managed to offer accurate and precise IoT coverage. Very useful, as many companies also want to know on a small scale what the coverage is like in a certain area. Unfortunately, the project had several problems. First, the lack of mappers. Only about 100 were produced at the beginning, and then nothing after that. This led to many people being screwed because they had done the onboarding of the gateway to ThingsIX, paying about $20, but they couldn't get rewards because no mappers passed through their area. And secondly, the onboarding of the gateway to ThingsIX wasn't easy. Few guides were made on the official site, and fortunately the community was good at creating guides. And here too, the excellent Crankk software was useful. But in addition to this, there were also many communication problems. Due to the lack of mappers, they tried to solve it with less secure mappers, where I also tried to help by giving suggestions. But nothing was ever done. And in fact, we began to see more and more that many choices that were proposed within the foundation were not carried out because Tim, the creator of the project, blocked them all. In the end, suddenly a few months ago, Tim, also tired of continuing the project, announced the abandoning of the project, and ThingsIX was sold to an investor who, after months, is still unknown. ThingsIX is a really bad story. A great idea, but it also shows that building a project requires a lot of care and a lot of willpower that the team has not been able to give. The project isn't technically dead, but it no longer shows any signs of life. Even if something were to happen, the credibility of the project will be difficult to recover. I wanted to talk about ThingsIX because the first advice I would like to give to the Crankk team is this: make the mapping in Crankk. And since now the IoT sensors are available, a good idea would be to use the T1000 as a mapper. This would give a new impulse to the Crankk IoT, making it more attractive. For example, also make a sort of game which is the idea that chirp is following. But in my opinion, this should now be the priority of Crankk. More Crankk IoT like mapping and less multi-mining of other depins that don't help Crankk much. The second advice and analysis that I would like to give in this video doesn't concern so much the Crankk team, but above all, Kadena. Alviso, the creator of Crankk, was very good at the beginning of the project because he created a DEX within the Crankk dashboard. This allowed the token to generate value, but it cannot be a forever solution. This DEX is internal. It's only found in the dashboard, and therefore it will never be able to attract traders. And above all, it's peer-to-peer. This means that being a free market, it can be difficult for many people. And in fact, there was someone who lost funds because they didn't know how it works. If Crankk has to be large-scale, it needs at least a DEX with a classic swap like in other blockchains. And for this, Kadena must necessarily help Crankk. A few months ago, the CRKK token was added to EchoDEX, a classic easy swap for everyone. And I was really happy about this news. But it turned out to be a scam because EchoDAO is closing. In fact, if you have deposited something in the liquidity of the Crankk pool, hurry up and transfer the funds you have until August 30th. The Crankk team certainly can't solve this problem, and in fact, Kadena absolutely has to do something more. Because Crankk is not only among the most important DPIN projects around, but it is also the most important of Kadena. And I'm honest if Kadena doesn't help Crankk making an easy swap, especially for the less experienced. Also for the lot of chains that can be complicated, and also providing liquidity to the pool can ruin a project. For this reason, I think that if the Kadena devs don't help, I do not say that the project needs to move to another blockchain. But then it is appropriate to think about bridging the CRKK token on Solana. It's the same thing that other important DPIN projects like WeatherXM or GeoDNet are doing. They continue to work on Arbitrum and Polygon, but to make the token more attractive, they make a bridge on Solana. Because whether you like it or not, Solana is now a point of reference also, because there is much more money circulating, and therefore there is a greater probability of success. For listing on a centralized exchange and other operations are much easier. In conclusion, in addition to the IoT sensor onboarding guide on Crankk, I really hope the team focuses more on LoRaWAN and less on multi-mining. I would love to see a mapping with the T1000. And for the token, I hope that Kadena will start helping Crankk more. Otherwise, I think that some other strategy is needed. A project with such a strong community and such a helpful team, it's really a shame if it doesn't have the success it deserves. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments what you think. Subscribe to the channel and like to help me make other videos. For the rest, happy mining everyone.